In rock and roll, it is a small world. I mean, you guys have played in so many bands. You're known. So it's like, hey, come on over. We have this tour or something. Was it like that?
Pretty much. Marco called me about this band. Well, you called. You made the phone call. You tell him.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all came from different places at different times, obviously, but the invitation came from David Lowy and David Edwards, David being the founder, from Australia. And at the time, there was John Stevens, who was a singer. I was touring in Australia with Thin Lizzy, Motley, Crue, Kiss thing, and that's when I got approached. To make a long story short, something happened with John Stevens, and we get to the point where, what do we do? Do we move forward? Do we wait? And we couldn't wait. We decided we had commitments. We had Cuba, the trip to Cuba, a tour with Kiss, studio book, to name a few things that are pretty important in our schedule. And so give John a call. And, in our business, man, it's very unusual when people actually answer the phone or even return your message or phone call. It takes weeks, sometimes months. And so I choose to believe that we were supposed to hook up, that he's supposed to be here. We're glad he came in. He came and did the 2 shows in Cuba and just hit it out of the park. We were really happy with him, and so now he's telling us what to do.
Oh, the Cuban thing was your first with the Dead Daisies?
Yeah, kind of an audition.
You can take it from there, bro.
If you want to call it that. First, I flew from Nashville to L.A. to meet. I knew Mark O'Brien, Dizzy, but I had never met David and Richard before, and I just wanted to go out and meet everybody. So I flew out there for that. And then David, our manager, said, would you be available to go to Cuba? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I think it was just, for lack of a better term, they had me come to Cuba. It was a trip that they had already been working on for the better part of a year. But I think it was kind of, I don't want to say an audition, but it was kind of just to see, if everybody worked well together and feel it out. No commitments after that, and then they realized how awesome I am. They realized, that it was working. So then we went to Sydney and finished recording the record, from there. But just a little side note, I do want to mention, though, that the reason why I'm here is because they did call Steven Tyler and Robert Plant and Paul Rogers and Tom Kiefer, Jeff Keith, and none of those guys were home. I was the only guy that picked the phone up. So,
with Kiss, you guys, you have worked with a lot of Kiss guys, starting from Bruce Kulick and Eric Singer.
Well, and then Eric, I have that ESP thing with Eric Singer, but I've known Gene since 1988. I was in a band before the Scream, and Gene was very interested in signing that band to his record label. So I've known Gene and Tommy from when he was in Black and Blue. So we all of us, Marco, we all go way back. So even being on tour with those guys. It was fun, man. It was like family, like old reunion or whatever. So it was very cool.
Yeah. Well, talking a bit about, back in the days, let's say 80s Sunset Strip. I mean, that's where like most of rock and roll that's around nowadays comes from, put it that way. But tell us a bit as far as you can remember.
I missed that whole, I'll be really honest, I missed that whole thing because I got sober in 87. I remember going there and hanging out, and I remember running like hell because I couldn't hang. I was newly sober. 87 September. And I'm starting to play. I got to LA, and John Sykes was one of the guys that I was working with. I did a few gigs, Edgar Winter, and then Bill Ward. Bill Ward was getting sober, so he stayed away from that whole scene. So these other guys are the guys to talk about that, because I was in fear of my sobriety and my sanity, and I stayed away for most of those years, to be honest. Yeah. So I don't know what John's history is.
I actually arrived in L.A. Because initially I'm from a town in America called Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I moved to L.A. in 1985. And it was pretty interesting, man. It was weird, like just everybody walking around with big hair and the girls with very little clothing on and parties at people's houses after shows. And LA at that time frame, the, 85, 84, 85, 6, 7, it was crazy. It was seriously out of control. Yeah. It was awesome.
What about the reunion of the century, having Slash and Axl back on tour?
You know what? I honestly, I can't speak for those guys. Everybody, including us, we have about as much information as the rest of the world.
Yeah. What do you think that, after decades, they're like...
You know what? Honestly, to be honest with you, I've always said that if they got back together again, they would do soccer, in America we call football. They would be doing football and soccer stadiums multiple nights all around the world. I think that's one band that everybody would love to see all of the original members get back together again. And
with Izzy, not sure about Steve,
Well, a band like that, man, that got into rock and roll history, and for whatever the reason, they fell apart. I mean, I'm still a music fan. I'd go.
A few more words to Cuba. You were there with ministers, and it was kind of like you guys were, the high guests.
Yeah, it was quite an event, man. In that, if you break it down, and I think most of us didn't realize the magnitude of the freaking event, because we're touring all over the planet, like you said. Okay, it's Cuba. Yeah, let's go to Cuba. It's another gig. I think it hit us when we hit Miami, and all of a sudden we're going to Cuba. Nobody's ever been here. Well, there's been a few bands off the radar that did it through the back end or whatever, but we were invited again. Managed to put it together, and we were on the top of the list, and we were lucky enough to make it there, representing frickin' the U.S. and the rest of the world, connecting Cuba to the rest of the world. So that was pretty cool. Once we got there, man, it was just exciting. Every moment, I have a problem sleeping, but there it was even harder. The brain was just, wow, this is history. No matter how you look at it, we're making a little bit of history.
I didn't realize until we got home, and then I started seeing all the stuff for the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and all these was it Billboard?
Yeah.
All these magazines in America started talking about the fact that we went there. And then I'm like, wow, this is fucking bigger than I thought. You know what I mean? So it was pretty cool.
One word to Nashville. You moved there from sunny California down to Nashville, Tennessee. I've just met a German band, Element of Crime. Mm-hmm. They were mixing their last 3 records in Nashville. So what is it about? Is the weather changing there?
No, you know what? Honestly, I don't think I was ever really totally comfortable living in California. I'm from Philadelphia, which is the East Coast, and it's in the north. So it gets cold. There's snow. There's seasons, and that was I used to living in California. I'd come outside and Christmas morning, in a pair of shorts and a fucking cup of coffee. And my mom came out to visit me before she passed away, and she sat outside, and it was hilarious. We were both having coffee, and she just sat there and she goes, "This is fucking wrong. This is wrong. Christmas, it's supposed to be cold and snowy and whatever." But I had been to Nashville a couple of times to write with other people. And I don't know, I just fell in love with the town. It's like everybody's, it's a big city with a small town mentality. So everybody's very social. There's great writers there, great studios.
And
great
you're not
producers.
the only rock musician there.
No. There's and it's funny, because a lot of my friends think it's just country western, but Robert Plant stays there, Sheryl Crow, Kid Rock, the Black Keys, Kings of Leon. The list is Cinderella, Winger, the Nelson Brothers. The list is huge. So there's a definite rock scene there. There's a blues scene, a jazz scene. There's country. There's a little bit of everything. You know, I don't miss, you know, it's not like I moved to this town and I go, God, I wish I could get some great sushi. You know what I mean? They had, you know, I have everything I need there. You know, I met a beautiful woman there. We have a great home together. We own a hair salon there, and it's awesome, man. I have great musical friends. And as it turns out, we're probably
Gonna be
in
recording that.
February. We're going to go back, and we're going to record our next record in Nashville. So
What's after Revolution?
that's
Like taking over the world.
next record's first. This record was called Revolution. Next record's called I Give. I Give Up.
Marco, since, you know, I'm sure you were like so many other rock musicians, a fan of Phil Lynott and Gary Moore.
Yeah.
You know, how was it then, you know, playing those songs?
I have to be really honest. You know, being from California, the West Coast, what I knew of Thin Lizzy were the Boys Are Back in Town, Jailbreak, maybe a whiskey in the jar occasionally, and a few others.
Yeah, they didn't get a lot
Right?
of airplay in Philadelphia
They
either.
didn't. They didn't in the U.S. And later on, I found out why, what happened. They fell apart for whatever the reason, but while they were touring. But so I was touring with John Sykes, Blue Murder. We were on the third album for Geffen, and we were in Japan. And this is how it happened. We're having dinner with Udo, the ritual dinner after the tour. Udo's one of the big promoters in Japan, and in conversation, he's like, "Well, John," because John was part of that lineup, you know, Thunder and Lightning, the last album. So, are you in touch with Scott? Are you in touch with Brian and Darren and the rest of the voices? Yeah, we talk from time to time. He says, "Why don't you call them and see if you could? Let's do something for Phil," just like that.
Hey guys, this is John Corabi.
Marco Mendoza,
We're the Dead Daisies, and you were watching
MULATSCHAG.
Turn It Up.
Keep on, keep it on.
Rock and roll.